My first impression when watching The War of the Worlds was that it wasn't very good and was in fact a bit like looking at a Super 8 film print. I put on When Worlds Collide and my first impression of that was it was better than The War of the Worlds. So a day later I went back, put on The War of the Worlds again and When Worlds Collide, and I could see that The War of the Worlds was indeed superior to When Worlds Collide and really wasn't as bad as I thought. My expectations had been sufficiently lowered and I found that I thought much more highly of it. Because my initial reaction to this one was that it wasn't very good, I also put it on through our telly and had a look at a few chapters on there, and indeed the picture quality looked far superior on the telly to being blown up in here to about 7 feet wide. In here it looked rather grainy, the colours seemed a little odd at times, but this is a genuine 3-strip dye transfer Technicolor, so it's worth taking that into account, and they can look fake at times because it had that surreal look, the really rich colours. They're not too rich on this one, but if you want to see a really rich Technicolor film on 4K, my recommendation is The Ten Commandments. That one was VistaVision, so not a 3-strip Technicolor, but the colours were separated out into the primary colours. And I give a pretty extensive demonstration of how the Technicolor process works in my own reviews of Spartacus and My Fair Lady, so I will leave links to those in the description below. You can see the Technicolor camera briefly in the extras. There's a making of extra on this 4K, and you can see the Technicolor camera, 3 strips of film going through it, one for each of the primary colours, and from those 3 matrices the dye transfer prints were struck. So this process did save a lot of films down the years, and indeed there were Technicolor prints of Star Wars, so from the original negative of that 3 matrices were made, and from those 3 matrices they were able to do 35mm prints that were shown in premiere theatres, and it was just as well because George Lucas kept a couple of those prints, and one of them was used for restoring the original negative back in 1997 because some of the original negative had faded so badly that it couldn't be salvaged. Anyway, if you're watching on a television and it's not an enormous television, I think you might be quite pleased with this 4K of The War of the Worlds. When Worlds Collide is actually pretty good. That one is a Blu-ray, so it hasn't got the colour gamut of War of the Worlds, but it is still pretty good. Both these films are Technicolor, and they're both in this double disc pack because they're George Powell produced films. The first thing I really wanted to say about The War of the Worlds is that for this 4K restoration, the wires that were so prevalent in every previous release of The War of the Worlds have been removed digitally. So I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but I suppose it's understandable because they want this film to be seen by a new audience and to survive long into the future. Until a few years ago, I believe it was in the top 100 AFI films, so it's completely understandable they want to update it slightly if they could. And I must say I did used to find those wires slightly distracting, even if I did come to appreciate them. Now this film was another marketing films release on Super 8, and it appeared in various versions including full length. I never actually saw the full length version, but I did see the cut downs. There was a 1x400 foot running about 16 or 17 minutes and a 3x400 foot running about 45 to 50 minutes, and you could clearly see the wires in that resolution. Now Super 8 is not as good as this 4K, although, as I said, I did feel that in here when I first put it on, it's just like looking at a Super 8 print. But I think my perceptions that first time were heightened, and lowering them to watch it again, I then felt, as I said, it was pretty good. And if you're watching on a telly and not a huge telly, I think that smaller size differential will mean that you'll be perfectly happy with this release. I first saw this film on a television broadcast, and I would have been a young boy at the time, and I can remember really enjoying it, but watching it today, what really struck me was how dated it is. Now, I find that quite appealing, actually, but one thing I don't really get my head around is the acting, which I think is truly awful in this, but I think it's quite deliberate, and they were going for a sort of comic book feel. When Worlds Collide was made in 1951, 2 years before The War of the Worlds, and the eagle-eyed among you will probably notice that there are some scenes duplicated from When Worlds Collide in The War of the Worlds. I don't suppose many people will spot it, but some of us do, and it's interesting to see. They're just sort of crowd shots, background things. but they are clearly evident. Both these films won Oscars for Best Special Effects, but it is obvious today with the clarity of the imagery on Blu-ray and 4K on small screens that whenever there's a matte painting and it's joining live action, you can clearly see where the matte paintings start. But at the time it was quite groundbreaking, and it's only really Ray Harryhausen who probably could have surpassed what was done in this. I think he and George Pal were good friends, and Ray Harryhausen apparently did try to get his own production of The War of the Worlds off the ground, but ultimately it went to George Pal. But you will see Ray Harryhausen talking about that in the making of extra, and it really is quite interesting. One other thing you'll see in that extra is the original film with the spacecraft and Martian ships coming along. Clearly see the wires visible, so they haven't been erased completely from this release, which is probably giving us the best of both worlds. The running time is 1 hour and 25 minutes and the aspect ratio is 1.33 to 1. Originally the film had 3-channel stereo, but it's been remixed and reworked today, and we've got a DTS 5.1, and I was surprised quite how good it was, particularly the city destruction sequence towards the end. When the Martians are coming towards their end, they're destroying every building in sight, killing everything in sight, and the sound effects in there really were going all around the room. So quite something for a film made in 1953, for it to sound so convincingly good this time later. May not be to everyone's taste, but I have to admit I rather enjoyed it on this occasion. I don't know what the master was for the 4K restoration. It says on the box, but after, where it details When Worlds Collide, this was restored in 4K from original film elements. Now that's a bit deceptive and can mean almost anything, but hopefully it was an original 3-strip separation matrices or a negative of some sort, but could also have been a Technicolor print. But When Worlds Collide, that's been restored in 4K as well, judging by what it says. So that's why the Blu-ray of this looks as good as it does. And it's not as colourful as War of the Worlds, but it is pretty colourful, looks good. Again, these special effects are a bit obvious at times, but some of it is pretty clever and probably groundbreaking at the time. Again, it's 133 to 1, so you've got pillar boxes, black bars down the sides. The sound is 2.0 mono, and it's pretty good quality, but I don't think it's up there with the War of the Worlds. Maybe when they remaster When Worlds Collide soundtrack, we'll get a 4K and a 5.1 surround sound that will really envelop us all. Then again, I think I'm pretty happy with the mono sound. So a pretty good release overall. I don't think I can fully recommend this one. It's a bit variable, or it gave me variable opinions, so when I watch it again in a few years' time, I think I'll firm up that opinion and really decide what I think about it. But if you like either of these films, I'd say it's worth a punt. One other thing I thought I'd mention is that there has been another version of H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds, and this one is missing the. So this one is War of the Worlds. It's the Steven Spielberg film starring Tom Cruise. I've never actually reviewed this 4K disc, but I think it's pretty good. It's a gritty film, deliberately so some may think excessive film grain, but my recollection of this at the cinema is that was how it looked, and so a pretty good representation of it again. And that's something to bear in mind with film, because film stocks vary, and the way the cinematographers can use it, they can produce all sorts of effects just from the film stock. Maybe I'll give that a full review one day when I watch it again. I was quite impressed with that. Now, I think it's time for a bit of an HMV update. Andy Electric Geek, he's been into his local air branch and he has shot a really good video in there. He's done a complete video with introduction, the store and what he bought, so he's got one of those haul videos on the end, and I think a bit of a review of 1 or 2 of the discs that he bought as well. So that one is really worth looking at. I was really impressed with it, and I think he's set the standard for us all. So maybe that's something for us all to aspire to, but I'm just happy to see these stores, and the air branch does look like a really nice store, and particularly with all that graffiti and some of the artwork that Andy tells us he saw being created by one of the HMV staff just before they opened this new branch. Jonathan Gorse has shot a video of his Guildford branch, and it's in this lovely shopping centre. Looks like a really nice branch to visit. He got a walk-in that I showed a bit of in the last video, but he also got some great photos as well to give us a good indication of just how interesting this branch of HMV is. So I can see myself calling in there if I'm ever close to Guildford one day. Blu-Ray Baz has been into Winchester, and in addition to the couple of shots he got outside the store, he's also showed us what he actually purchased on the day. I'm not too sure of the Star Wars films on 4K because I'm not particularly keen on these rehashed versions, but a few great purchases there by Blu-Ray Baz. And we've got some more volunteers to go into stores. LeShark75, he's hoping to get some video of HMV Manchester, so that one should be interesting. Pro Physical Media has volunteered to do Bristol, so that should be another quite big store. And 4K Michelin Star Movies is going to see if his local Watford store will let him shoot some video in there. So it looks like there's plenty more to come on these HMV tag videos, and I'm finding it really interesting seeing some of these great HMV stores around the UK. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and perhaps consider subscribing so I'll be encouraged to carry on creating content like this. Until the next video, bye bye for now.